Hi everyone, my name's Jessica, and today we're going to be talking about Unit 4. So this might be the first time where we have actually seen each other face to face. Well, not really face to face, but through the internet. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jessica, and today I'm going to be talking with a few other coworkers. So we thought it might be nice for you guys to have an opportunity to hear how we would have a natural conversation using some of the topics in the textbook. So if you want to follow along with your textbook, just turn to Unit 4 and we're going to be going through some of the major pages in Unit 4. So I hope you find the video useful, and I hope we can see each other pretty soon, I hope. So everybody, just stay healthy and be safe, and I will see you soon. Hi, this is Jessica Cahill.
Hello, this is Kalpos and Banjo.
Hi there, I'm Greg Dawson.
Hello, this is Sunny Lee.
Today we're going to be looking at Unit 4 from the textbook, Customs and Traditions.
In today's lecture, we shall be treating three different topics. The first topic we shall treat is to watch and understand a video about the Coming of Age Day in Korea. It is about a 4-minute video, and I recommend that you watch and listen to it very carefully. The second topic we'll be treating is about avoiding generalizations. This is useful for when you are making an argument to avoid generalizations so as to help you deliver a stronger point. Generalizations tend to detract from the point you're making and weaken your argument. So we shall teach you how to avoid making generalizations and to be very specific with the points that you make. The third point is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is to summarize either a work or a full paragraph to keep it brief and succinct. We shall be treating these today, and I hope you enjoy the lecture.
As in many cultures around the world, a coming-of-age day is celebrated. A celebration of the age at which a person becomes an adult and gains all the rights and responsibilities that go along with that. In South Korea, Coming-of-Age Day is celebrated on the same day for everybody. It is held on the third Monday in May for all 19-year-olds who will become 20-year-olds in the coming year. In modern-day South Korea, many celebrate the day by giving gifts of flowers. Parents or friends often give 20 roses, one for each year of the person's life. Perfume is another popular gift, as it is not common for children to wear perfume. For South Koreans, perfume has a special meaning. Giving perfume helps the new adult to become a person that people remember. The modern coming-of-age day comes from a ceremony which dates back over 1,000 years. The hair-changing ceremony. For many years, the old ceremony was not very common. But these days, it is again possible to take part in the traditional ceremony in many cities in South Korea. Young women do their hair in a chignon with a binya, a jade hairpin. On their heads, they wear a jokduri, a kind of silk and wooden crown, covered with colorful decorations, including enamel ornaments. During the ceremony, young men tie their hair under a net in a topknot. Later, they will put on a hat made of bamboo and horsehair, called a gat. The young people also learn how to put on the brightly colored traditional formal clothing known as hanbok. In fact, there are 3 different kinds of clothing ritual throughout the day. This is an important day in every young Korean's life, as it is the day when they are independent for the first time, able to make decisions for themselves, drive, and marry. The young adults bow to their parents. The parents bow in return and speak to their child of how proud they are of them as they become adults. For those who take part in the traditional ceremony, it is a day they will never want to forget.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video. Let's now have a look at some discussion questions. Firstly, what are the differences between the modern and the traditional celebrations of the coming of age ceremony in South Korea? Personally, I have lived here in South Korea for almost 20 years now. My wife is Korean. I've spent a lot of time with her family and many nieces and nephews who have grown up and, become 19 years of age and older. And I haven't personally experienced any of these coming of age ceremonies. So, to be honest, I'm a little bit unfamiliar with them. Of course, in Korea there are many traditional ceremonies, the ancestral ceremonies, Jeisa, especially on Solal and Chuseok. But the discussions in the video about the traditional ceremonies with the hairpins and wearing the traditional clothes and receiving advice from their elders, I haven't seen that myself. Has anyone else experienced any of these things?
Well, I have to say that I have seen a lot of students carrying roses around that time, and I asked somebody, well, what is this holiday about? And they said, oh yeah, this is the coming of age day. But perhaps it's a little bit more informal than it was in the past. It seems that they don't wear the traditional clothing, and it's simply a matter of receiving some flowers.
Yeah, okay, sure. I think possibly comparing the modern and traditional celebrations, in my more relevant experience, I have seen a lot of Koreans when they turn 19, Korean age, gathering with their friends and going out to have some chicken and beer.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some traditional celebrations in our countries. And one of the traditional celebrations in America is the Sweet 16. So that is a big, important age in America, and it's sort of becoming, not really an adult, but becoming an adolescent. And also a lot of American people, they learn how to drive around that time. So, the richer families might give their children a car. Nowadays, I don't think it's as prevalent as it was in the past. I think it's, more of a traditional celebration.
Yeah, I'm from Australia, and it's very similar, I think, between Australia and America in many ways. The big sort of celebration parties definitely are firstly at turning 18, which is the legal age in Australia for voting, drinking, etc. And that's definitely a gathering, I think, with close friends and family where there's a bit of a sort of an event. But the more traditional celebration is the 21st birthday party, which is very much an organised function. People usually, rent out an event centre or have it at their house, but invite a lot of people for a big kind of organised celebration. So I think out of all of these ages, 21, the 21st birthday party, is probably the biggest celebration that we certainly have in Australia. I believe in America also.
Oh yes, when we turn 21, that's the legalized drinking age, and also we can go to casinos. So right. I remember going to a casino and going to a bar when I turned 21.
I do just have to mention, I find it strange and a little bit surprising still when I realise that Americans cannot legally drink until they're 21, meaning that most university students for their first few years are not legally able to drink. That in Australia, that's not the case. Yeah.
But usually we do anyway, so nobody stops us.
Right.
And I think I can talk about Canada's case, but it's pretty much the same as how it's been treated in America. And the only thing that I remember about the celebration of coming of age day was not officially there, but we kind of had a party named as prom, which happens at the end of our secondary years. Secondary meaning it's like a high school of Korea. And when they graduate from high school, when they graduate from secondary school in Canada, they have this party that's called as prom. And this prom party is like a sign for everybody that they can do anything that's allowed only for adults. So we could start to drink, or we could actually start to drive. So one of the cultures, like how parents were giving out keys to students or to kids, to their children, approving that they're now an adult, and that giving the key also happened on that prom night. So when they're finished with the party for the day-long event, they started to kind of drive around and in their dresses and suits. That's one big part of the whole culture itself. In prom party, everybody dressed up so much. Like they were all in their black suits and like princess-like dresses and all full makeup on them. And so that was actually the sign for everybody that, oh, now we are an adult. So I guess that's pretty much it. But it wasn't the official day that's called national-wise or the government level. But it was just happening as an individual school event. And that was it. So that's all I have to say about Canada.
So moving on to page 85, we have a question there. What rules do visitors to your country need to know in order to be polite? And we have on this section beneath different customs and behaviors and the rules. I'm going to talk about greetings. Being raised in 3 different countries, I've seen 3 different types of cultures. One I'll focus on is raised in England and being raised in America. It's very similar. Both have very similar greeting cultures. Most people keep it very succinct, brief, and polite. The Brits tend to talk about the weather a lot. They're kind of like their neutral conversation starter, just to be polite and general. They don't want to ask personal questions. Like how you ask questions how it's usual for Koreans to ask, what is your age or how old are you? That is considered a very, very extremely rude question in both England and America. You don't ask that the first time you meet someone. You don't ask that the second time you meet them. You don't even ask that the third time you meet them. In most cases, you wait for them to tell you their age and you don't even ask. It's considered very rude to ask that question. General handshakes are polite. Kissing on the first day between England and American cultures is cheek kisses. It's not something done. If you go to France or Italy or even Saudi Arabia or Dubai, people tend to kiss each other on the cheek. You see in Saudi Arabia or Dubai, men kissing each other on the cheek 3 times. You see in Italy 2 kisses on the cheek. You see in Spain and France the same thing like that. It's called a continental greeting. America and England tend to be very, very distant in that regard. So it's a nice handshake. Sometimes not even a handshake, just a nod of the head and a verbal greeting like, oh, hello, how are you? Good day to you. Shaking hands is always okay. But nowadays in the climate of coronavirus, it is always good just to say hello and not shake hands because you never know where somebody's hands have been.
Elbow bumps.
An elbow bump, yes. An elbow bump is always good. Maybe tap the toe, maybe, never know. Nod the head, yeah. So greetings between American and British culture is always kind of similar. Different from if you go to Italy, Spain, and France, which is probably why the coronavirus spread so much there, but yes.
Okay, looking at giving gifts, firstly just looking at a cultural difference. Having been to a number of housewarming parties in Korea, as you all know, the traditional gift over here is to give toilet paper or detergent when people move into a new place. I do remember at first thinking that was a little bit impersonal. It didn't seem very friendly. It was kind of too practical. And from a Western point of view, generally people like something a little more nice and friendly and sort of, things that you can share. Obviously, again, in the current coronavirus age, these gifts are perfect. No one. I don't think people are giving away treasured toilet paper as much as they used to. To be honest, people probably shouldn't be having housewarming parties at the moment anyway. But that's a difference. I think when people have parties in Australia, again, I think it's similar in Canada, America, and England. A more standard gift is maybe a bottle of wine, maybe a box of chocolates, something that people can kind of share and enjoy together on the evening. Yes, any other thoughts on that, guys?
I noticed, in Korea, people tend to give gifts a lot more than in America. So usually in America, we only give them for our close friends, and usually just like a birthday or Christmas present. But we don't usually, give gifts to somebody we've met one time or something. So it's usually just for our special friends or family.
I like the Korean tradition also when people move into a new apartment especially, neighbours often come around with some rice cakes or something just to welcome the new people and sort of get to know them. I think maybe that might happen a little bit in our countries, but nowhere near as much, I don't believe.
So I got the impression that giving a gift is not to be polite in different cultures than Korea. It's more about expressing your love to the person who you already feel comfortable with. So you don't have to give a gift to anybody who is in a condition where you don't feel close enough. But it's like an action that's followed after you get close to somebody first, and then you give a gift. So the way how you take the gift and receive the gift means a little different from Western culture to Korea, I think.
Okay, looking at behaviour in business meetings. Firstly, as we mentioned before about greetings, of course in Korea people will often bow in a business setting, which of course doesn't happen in Western culture. People will shake hands, even women, between women and men, it doesn't really matter. A short, firm handshake is the standard sort of greeting in a business setting. In terms of behaviour in the business meetings themselves, I'd suggest Western business meetings often have a slightly less formal tone. Obviously, Korean company structure has a strong hierarchy, and people show proper respect for their seniors and the older company members. It's a little bit more open in a Western business environment. It depends on the boss and the way they choose to conduct their own meetings. But I think, generally speaking, you'd find a slightly more informal tone in a Western business setting. Do you agree, guys?
Yeah, one thing I was just thinking about is that how sometimes business meetings can occur in places like, golf courses, etc. Like, I don't know if that's the case in Korea, but, sometimes you see that in America. So they don't always have to be in a formal setting. It could be, doing some kind of activity or, through some social situation.
And along with that, I also saw saw the case of my friend who was inviting the client's family over for dinner with nice wine and steaks, and they kind of treated the other client's family in a very nice way, but it wasn't really formal, but I found that was actually a part of the business too. So that's again another case of being a little informal in a way, but I don't know if it happens in Korea or not. I guess it doesn't really happen, inviting the client's family over to their own house rarely happens in Korea. So I think that's how it's a little bit different in terms of the tone and the manner.
Sure. There's also a difference in company drinking culture between Western nations and Korea. In Western countries, people do go out for staff drinks with their co-workers, but it's an informal thing. People don't have to attend. It's usually on a Friday night, and it's an irregular thing, only when people want to, maybe only once every couple of months or something. Yeah, Christmas party, absolutely. Every year there's a big Christmas function where everyone gathers for a drinking party with a nice meal. Korean culture is, of course, different, as you guys know. The Huishik culture of going out for company drinks, staff drinks. I think the culture is changing. You'll be happy to know before you enter the business world. In the past, it was a very common occurrence, depending on your boss and how much he or she wanted to drink. But these days, I think the pressure is slightly lessening, but still, people do go out, of course, in Korea for company drinks reasonably often. Guys, any thoughts?
Well, on that note, that leads me to thinking about business dress code. So yeah, I think in Korea it's quite more formal than I've experienced in America. When I worked for a company in America, a lot of people, they never wore like a suit and a tie. They would wear things like, polo shirt or khaki pants, etc. And the females usually, wear a nice skirt or, sometimes even jeans we would wear, to be honest. So yeah, it wasn't as formal as what I've seen in Korean companies.
Actually, adding to that, I think actually in America, it depends on what state you're in, and also, for example, what enterprise or what industry you're working in. For example, I know in California, if you're, say, for example, working in, the blue chip IT industry, their dress codes are more laid back. But if, say, for example, you're working on Wall Street, your dress code for your business is going to be a suit and tie, looking like, businessman. You have to look the part. So that depends on the industry. Also, if you're in, for example, say the heartland, say you're in some states where are more conservative in their social ideas and ideology, they will have also a more conservative ideals and ideology with regards to business and business dresses. So different states and different industries will change the type of dress code there is. Also, sometimes it might just be how your boss is. So sometimes your boss could be a very relaxed person and just says everybody should be relaxed at work. Or your boss could be a very strict person and he will make you wear suit and ties. So it just depends on that. That's my opinion on it. With regards to punctuality, just speaking from an American and British perspective, I think most American and British people, it depends on certain things. Is it a formal setting or is it an informal setting? So formal setting meaning like work or maybe studies or a business meeting. Usually people for a formal setting, I think anywhere around the world for a formal setting, be on time, never be late. So you'll say you're visiting America or England and you have a business meeting, be on time, don't be late. It's always better to be, in fact, it's always better to be early than late. But for, say, informal setting, meeting your friends, it depends. There's so many variables in that. Punctuality between friends, informal settings, to me, there are too many variables to talk about on that. Does anybody want to jump in on that? No?
I absolutely agree with you there, Jace. The one other setting is when people invite you to their house for a dinner party or something, as in Western nations, I believe, all Western nations, the polite thing to do is to be just a little bit late, about 10 or 15 minutes, to allow the people hosting the party enough time to prepare everything, just in case they are running a little bit behind schedule. Being half an hour or 1 hour late starts becoming very rude, but about 10 or 15 minutes late is the kind of expected arrival time for a party at someone's house.
Okay, let's now move on to the reading passage. Just like last time, we are going to read the passage out loud along with the paragraphs, just because that there are students who still don't have the book, and it's easier for you to just take a look at the whole passage as separated as the paragraphs as laid out in each slide. Okay, this is the first paragraph. In today's ever-changing global landscape, most of us recognize the importance of preserving our own unique culture heritage. But what do we save? A magnificent building which is under threat, a historical part of a city, an important work of art? All of these are significant. But what about our songs, stories, ceremonies, and traditional practices? These intangible aspects of our culture can be just as meaningful as anything we build or create. Shouldn't they also be preserved for future generations to experience and enjoy?
The answer, according to UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, is yes. That is why, in 2008, it published its first Intangible Cultural Heritage, ICH list. You may already know of UNESCO's famous list of World Heritage Sites, consisting of places selected for special protection because of their value to the world, such as the Pyramids of Giza in Egypt or the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. However, the ICH list is different. Its purpose is to record living customs and traditions which are endangered by globalization. These include languages and spoken traditions, such as storytelling and poetry, performing arts, traditional crafts, and local knowledge and beliefs.
Today, there are more than 400 customs and traditions on the ICH list. Two recent entries show us just how rich and varied are the practices selected for protection. The culture of Jeju Haneo, the women divers of Jeju Island in South Korea, was added to the list in 2016. These amazing women dive 10 meters under the sea to get food without the use of breathing equipment. They do this for up to 7 hours a day, 90 days of the year, holding their breath for about 1 minute every dive. Knowledge of diving practices is passed down from generation to generation within families. Yet today, most of the divers are in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. As they have become older, younger women have not stepped in to take their place, meaning the practice is in danger of disappearing.
Another cultural practice added to the ICH list in the same year is falconry. This is the ancient custom of hunting with trained birds of prey, such as falcons and hawks. Regarded as both an art form and a sport, it requires years of training and discipline. Falconry is practiced around the world, from France to Mongolia to the United Arab Emirates, which is home to the world's first falcon hospital, and each year hosts a falcon beauty contest. Sadly, falconry is now threatened by the growth of cities and the loss of natural habitats. There are fears that the practice may disappear unless efforts to preserve it are successful.
Both Jeju Haenyeo and falconry illustrate the tremendous range of cultural practices which the ICH list was created to preserve. And yet, while most of us would agree that UNESCO's efforts are valuable, I find myself questioning the fairness and the usefulness of the ICH list. Why are some customs and practices included while others are not? Who decides this? Does inclusion on the list make a difference in the long term? In this age of rapid globalization, when fewer younger people are interested in learning about the customs of their ancestors, it may already be too late to preserve much of our diverse and precious cultural heritage. But for the benefit of future generations, I believe we should never stop trying.
Okay, continuing on page 91, let's look at some more discussion questions. Firstly, number one, what is the difference between tangible and intangible culture? They're reasonably difficult words, tangible and intangible. If you haven't experienced these before, tangible means something that you can touch, something real. Intangible, of course, is something abstract. So of course, tangible, when you're talking about culture, tangible are buildings, structures, monuments. As you can see in the picture, of course, the pyramids, the Sphinx are tangible, are examples of tangible culture. Intangible culture are languages, songs, traditions, things that are sort of ideas or concepts that, that are within cultures.
For the next question, question 2, it's asking what are the reasons why so many intangible traditions are dying out? From my standpoint, it is a question of globalization. The world has moved in a very globalized way and become very computerized. Many people, especially young people, are more into computers, and this is introducing them to things outside of their culture, things that they find more dynamic. The things that build a culture, historically have built cultures, have been things that existed before computers. We're talking languages, ancient structures, dances, ideas and ideals from more traditional times. As time progresses, these things somewhat become obsolete. They become more idealistic as opposed to practical and useful. So the young generation are caught between these ideals and the reality that they face of the world changing. And the young generation, as history all over the world, will move in a progressive way forward. And the ideals that built a culture will be left in the past. And that's my opinion on this.
Well, I think one thing we need to talk about too is colonization, which, for example, I was just thinking about like languages, like for example, Gaelic was something that almost got completely, wiped out of some countries. And so, the governments of Ireland, they had to work very hard to re-educate people in their native language because when they were colonized, the British, they didn't want them to speak their own language because they thought that could create people, rebelling against them, etc. So we need to also talk about how a lot of intangible cultures are actually aggressively being destroyed. So I think that is a really important fact that wasn't really talked about by the book.
All right, let's have a look at question number 3. Why did UNESCO create the Intangible Cultural List? Just another way that I believe different intangible cultures around the world are coming under threat is due, again, globalization means that there's a lot of cultural appropriation, and certainly in the media and entertainment industry, where you have things like Netflix, which are globally available, where, to be honest, different languages and cultures get much more exposure. And clearly, I think the US industry, Hollywood, American TV shows, music, and as well as films, are very dominant the world over these days. Having said that, there are other cultures that can be experienced through many of these different realms. And to be honest, Korea provides a very good example with K-pop, which has become wildly popular all around the world. So there are different cultures that can be experienced by many different people from other regions. However, lesser languages, less popular cultural traditions are the ones that suffer in this climate. And as Jess very, very intelligently pointed out just before, many of these sort of minority cultures are actively trying to preserve their languages, traditions, songs, to make sure they're not lost in sort of the globalized progression. And I believe that that's the reason that UNESCO came on board and created this intangible cultural list, to actually recognise which things, which cultures are coming under threat, so that people can try and work to, preserve them.
Okay, on question number 4, does the author believe UNESCO's work is important? How do you know? Okay, that part we have to go back to the passage that was just given before. So last passage of the paragraph, I mean not the paragraph, the passage is giving you the idea here. So it may already be too late to preserve much of our diverse and precious cultural heritage, but for the benefit of future generations, I believe we should never stop trying. So that was the stance of UNESCO along with the position of the author of this writing.
Now what we're going to do is take a look at page 91. And we have 3 questions there. Can local customs and practices compete with globalization? In a globalized world, which customs are most likely to survive and which will probably disappear? And what can countries do to preserve their living cultural heritage? What is your country doing? And these are just 3 questions which you are going to discuss. Think on them for a moment and we shall discuss them.
Okay, let's talk about avoiding generalizations now on page 92. In academic English, be careful not to make generalizations unless you have details to support them. For instance, a reader of the example sentence below could argue that not all cultural traditions change. Okay, so our original sentence is all cultural traditions change. And we can say sometimes that is not true, right? We sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. So we do not want to make a blanket statement like that. What you can do is you can avoid doing this by using words such as many, can, or tend to.
In this next activity, we'll give you a chance to practice avoiding generalizations. So let's take a quick look. Read the generalizations about common customs, then use the words in brackets to make the sentences more accurate. Number 1, we tip the waiter in restaurants, using tend to. Number 2, Brazilian culture is informal. Again, tend to. Number 3, expensive gifts look suspicious. Can. Number 4, common hand gestures like waving are misunderstood in a different culture. Can. Number 5, in the Middle East, old people live with their children. Many. So take a minute, have a look at each example and use the suggested input and make a smooth sentence where you avoid using the initial generalization. Okay, let's take a look at the answers. So for the first one, we tip the waiter in restaurants is a generalization. Using tend to, you can soften the generalization by saying, we tend to tip the waiter in restaurants, which means not always. Yep. Number 2, Brazilian culture is informal. It's too exact. We can again include tend to. Brazilian culture tends to be informal. Number 3, expensive gifts look suspicious. And again, we can include can. Expensive gifts can look suspicious. Again, means not every time, just it's possible. Number 4, common hand gestures like waving are misunderstood in a different culture. Using can, common hand gestures like waving can be misunderstood in a different culture. And lastly, number 5, in the Middle East, old people live with their children. We can include many, making it in the Middle East, many old people live with their children. So of course it means not always, but often.
Now we're going to move on to a section that will help you not make generalizations. In English, what we tend to do is use adverbs of frequency to avoid making generalizations. For example, in Tokyo, people usually go to work by train or bus. That is preventing you from making a broad, sweeping generalization. If I was to make a generalization, I would say, in Tokyo, people go to work by train or bus. That might not be true. Maybe people take a taxi. Maybe people drive their own car. Maybe people walk. Maybe people cycle. So we use usually to avoid making a generalization. Or formal dinner parties are often difficult to organize. We used here often, and often and usually are adverbs of frequency. Now, if I make it just a normal generalization, formal dinner parties are difficult to organize. I don't know that. Is it a fact? We're not sure, but it is a generalization. So, to avoid that, we use often. There are several types of adverbs of frequency. We have always, usually and typically, often, frequently, sometimes, occasionally, seldom, rarely, never. And always is an absolute, and never is an also absolute on opposite sides of the spectrum. When you are making statements and you want to avoid making generalizations, you have to gauge and decide upon the spectrum how much the adverb of frequency is. Is it sometimes? Is it always? Is it usually? Is it typically? Is it rarely? Is it occasionally? So knowing and learning and understanding adverbs of frequency will help you when you're doing academic writing to not make broad sweeping generalizations.
So there's another set of questions allowing you to use the adverbs of frequency to avoid generalizations. So this is on page 93. I'll read the question sentences first. Number 1, Brazilian men shake hands, though it is not unusual for men to kiss each other on the cheek. Usually. Number 2, Saudi men wear traditional clothing even to business meetings. Often. Number 3, professionals get upset if you don't use their correct title. Sometimes. Number 4, cultural knowledge is helpful in business situations. Frequently. Number 5, in Japan, you should arrive on time for an appointment. Always. Okay, it's now your time. Take a few minutes to solve all of these questions on your own and continue with the listening. I'm gonna give you guys out the answer too. Okay, now I'm going to give you guys the answer. Number 1, Brazilian men usually shake hands, though it is not unusual for men to kiss each other on the cheek. Number 2, Saudi men often wear traditional clothing, even to business meetings. Number 3, professionals sometimes get upset if you don't use their correct title. Number 4, cultural knowledge is frequently helpful in business situations. Number 5, in Japan, you should always arrive on time for an appointment.
Okay, let's now take a look at paraphrasing on page 95. Paraphrasing is rewriting someone else's ideas in your own words. It's important because copying another person's exact words without referring to the source is plagiarism, which means stealing someone else's ideas. So you should always remember to include your source when paraphrasing. And in the little cartoon, what do you mean all my facts are wrong? I copied everything straight off the internet. That's an example of plagiarism.
Okay, so one strategy that we will use when paraphrasing is replacing words with synonyms. These are just words that have similar meanings. So our original direct quotation was, international travel has many benefits, but visitors can run into trouble if they don't know some basic rules about the cultures they are visiting. And you can see where the source came from, Schmidt 2018. Okay, so if we wanted to paraphrase this with synonyms, we have foreign travel has many advantages, but travelers can have problems unless they spend time learning the customs of the places they are visiting. Schmidt, 2018.
Another example of a way to paraphrase is by changing the order. So looking at the same first sentence, international travel has many benefits, but visitors can run into trouble if they don't know some basic rules about the cultures they are visiting. The source again is Schmidt 2018. So, changing the order. Foreign travel has many advantages, but unless travellers learn about the customs of the places they are visiting, they can have problems. Schmidt 2018.
And the last strategy that you can use for paraphrasing is using an indirect speech. So just like before, you're using the same sentence, but we will lay out the idea in this way, according to Schmidt 2018, and then you can just address the same idea afterwards as it's given. So foreign travelers has many advantages, but visitors can run into trouble, blah, 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 blah. So you can finish that sentence like that. And another version will be Schmidt 2018 and states that, and you can start your sentence with that expression there, and then continue addressing the same idea afterwards. Foreign travel has many advantages, but visitors can run into trouble, blah, blah, blah.
On page 96, there's another example of how to match paraphrase with strategy. So the original text is, Brazilians typically stand very close to each other and touch each other's arms, elbows and back regularly while speaking. Schmidt 2018. Maybe not as much these days. Anyway, that's the example. So the paraphrase. So 1, according to Schmidt 2018, Brazilians tend to stand very close to each other and touch each other's arms, elbows and back regularly while speaking. This one is an example of paraphrasing using indirect speech.
Okay, let's talk about another strategy. So our original text again, Brazilians typically stand very close to each other and touch each other's arms, elbows, and back regularly while speaking. Okay, our paraphrase section is Brazilian people tend to stand quite close to one another and they frequently touch each other on the upper body while they are talking. So this is synonyms.
This is the last example of paraphrasing. This same original text in yellow changed into this sentence. While they're talking, Brazilian people tend to stand very close to one another and touch each other's backs, arms, and elbows frequently. So as you look at it, the last part of this sentence, while speaking, is given in the similar words at the beginning of the sentence form, and then the rest of the beginning part was given here to finish the sentence. So this is the example of changing the order, which is the last paraphrasing strategy out of those 3 that were previously mentioned.
And this concludes our talk today. So I hope you found that useful and informative, and I hope we will see each other soon. Anyway, we will see each other on the internet. So I will see you later. Bye.